Well, hi, everyone. This is Sebastian Traeger, Managing Director at Reliability.com, and we're back with another episode of Reliability 4.0. As always, we're on a mission to help make the world a more reliable place. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by one of our clients and also a friend, Jerid Jackson. Jerid, it is great to have you on the show today. Jerid serves as the Reliability and Asset Management Senior Manager at PepsiCo Foods North America. He's based right outside of Dallas. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. But again, we're so thankful that you're here. Thanks for joining us on the call.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Just as we kick off, I'd love to hear you just talk a little bit about your company. I know a lot of people know, like when they think Pepsi, they're going to know a lot, but they probably don't understand how big that umbrella is. And then your role specifically there.
Yeah, you bet. Of course, PepsiCo has so many different brands and is truly a global company. With some of the more recent acquisitions and stuff you may have heard of, we're probably close to 300,000, employees globally. My role, I've focused mostly in the food side, more so with Frito-Lay and those snacks, but here more recently got involved with the Quaker and Siete brand, which is a new one that we brought on, and also starting to work more with Sabra hummus as well. So. And then our role is kind of a headquarters reliability support group. So just part of a group. I think relatively to the size of the company, I think a relatively small group. We've got about 10 folks there in the headquarters that support, the CMMS system, reliability fundamentals, and then also kind of rapid response to, downtime events or things like that.
Well, I want to dive a little bit more into that, but I feel like I need to ask your favorite beverage and your favorite snack at the company. Oh. What would those two be?
Yeah, I mean, probably the favorite beverage, PepsiCo's Gatorade stuff too. So the orange Gatorade Zero's probably a good favorite, and then man, on the snack sides, I'd really just like the old originals, either Lay's originals in the yellow bag, or depending on kind of what time of year it is. For some reason, the Fritos in the fall and winter, and Lay's potato chips in the spring and summer. So
nice. Well, I've had the chance to visit you a couple times. It is a real treat to kind of just see all those snacks that you guys offer and that available and in that little store. So it's pretty neat. Again, before we dive into the work stuff, I also love to always ask people, like, what do you like to do outside of work? What do you do outside of the work context?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, every minute I get outside of work, I either now spend it most of the time at a baseball game with my 14-year-old son, Krager. He keeps my wife and I busy. Our two daughters, Ashley and Avery, they're both 19 and 21. So, we still see them sometimes, but we get to focus on the young boy now. And then other than family, man, I'm just eat up with old car stuff. So any chance I get to spend out here in the shop working on an old car is what I try to do.
What are you working on now?
Got several going. One of the neatest ones I've got right now, I've got a 1966 Chevelle. That's a L78, which is a 375 horse car. Pretty rare car, but what's neat about this one is it was wrecked in 1975, which was the year I was born, and it hasn't been on the road since. So, I've gathered up everything, got all the original paperwork and stuff to put it back as a all original. Hopefully get to put it back on the road after being down for 50 years.
Well, so I know this isn't necessarily on topic, but how did you get that car? I mean, and what's the story behind a car that wrecked 50 years ago and then just sat around?
Right. Well, it's kind of it is a good story, and it just, to me, it just almost happened as it was supposed to. I guess it was only a few miles from where I live. And a friend of mine sent me to this guy's house to look at another vehicle because I was close and he lived further away. And while I was there looking at another vehicle for a friend of mine, I saw this gentleman's Chevelle collection, and he told me the story about his baby that was wrecked back in 1975. And I said, well, what happened to it? And he said, well, it's right back here. And he's getting to be in his 80s. The original owner was in his 80s, and he said he had given up the possibility of putting it back together himself. So he bought one already done and was ready to sell that car. So that's kind of how it happened.
So will you keep it or sell it yourself?
I'm not sure. I mean, I want to build it because I really have a passion for finding them that's been sitting for a while and putting them back together and getting them back on the road. Just kind of, that's the main motivation, especially a special car like that one with the, relatively low miles, a good, neat history. all the paperwork and stuff. So
pretty unique. That's great. Well, I'm sure we could have a whole nother podcast just on your car collection, but
That's right.
we'll dive back in. So yeah, you shared a little bit. Your team is kind of doing a number of things, and root cause analysis falls under that. How does that fit? Let's just kind of start a little high level. How does that fit under all your responsibilities?
Yeah, being the reliability side, and we probably started looking for ways to do better root cause analysis, and I say root cause problem elimination. Because if we don't get the solutions implemented, we wasted time with the analysis, I guess, right? But from being a headquarters, kind of a support team, visiting with all of the different sites, it was obvious everybody was doing things quite a bit differently, if at all, honestly. Usually pretty shallow analysis and things like that, and then not a lot of follow through. So we struck out looking for a way to improve unplanned downtime was mainly the first objective. We wanted a program and a tool that would help us do that. So that's kind of how we are. We're divided up to support all of our 6 regions. So, any one of us, will be working with the sites in those regions. And, if they have a troubling event, we try to support and work them through analysis and help them track the corrective actions. So.
That's great. We've been working together now for probably, is it 3 or just over 3 years? Hard to believe, but what challenges were you facing? I know you guys looked into and decided to use EasyRCA, but why don't you just give us, you shared some of like those challenges, but what were kind of those challenges you were facing before then?
Yeah, I think I touched on some of them there, but mainly, with if you really count all the sites now, back then, I was supporting probably 32 sites, and now it's getting closer to 40 in some way or another. So a lot of different sites. You can imagine a lot of lines running at each site, a lot of different people. People move through the different positions, fairly rapidly. A lot going on, a lot of opportunity for improvement, even though our uptime numbers and stuff are relatively decent. But the fact of the matter was that everyone was doing an analysis to different levels, from pretty thorough analysis to nothing at all, and there was no oversight in that, and not that it was needed so much, but one of the pieces that's really missing is the follow through. So we weren't sure. We would get a report on an analysis of a failure or an opportunity, but then not know if the solutions got implemented all the way through. So some standardization, a little bit of accountability, a little bit of follow through. As we were evaluating the tool, it needed to be simple enough to do very simple analysis, but powerful enough to give us the thorough analysis plus the follow up pieces. So
good.
Well,
that was one of the next questions I was going to ask. Just as you were evaluating different solutions, you mentioned both easy and powerful. Maybe what were other kind of criteria you were considering to lead you in the EasyRCA direction over other options you may have considered?
Yeah. So, like you said, easy to use, versatile, and then the power of it. And then probably as much as anything, the ability to support that multiple site, that situation we have, or our network. So the ability to have multiple users. And, part of the benefit of that was definitely standardizing the analysis and stuff, but probably more than any other job I've had or company I've worked with, just our opportunity to replicate is huge. We may have one particular absolute identical model of equipment, same, model, and we may have 1,500 of them. So, if we solve a solution, solve a problem, develop a solution at one site. So I needed that solution to have some visibility across the platforms.
Great. So walk us through maybe how is EasyRCA being used in your organization? How did you roll it out? How fast did it go? And then how's it being used now?
Yeah. So like you said, we've started our relationship here probably, this is probably the 4th year maybe. And, definitely due to you guys' willingness to work with us and stuff, we were able to stagger and do some pilots. I think we started with 25 users and then jumped up to 75. And then, I had more people at the end of the year wanting to use it, and we didn't want that to be any kind of obstacle. So you let us go up to 100. And then now I believe I don't remember exactly, but in the hundreds, 650, yeah. I'm going to guess, probably close to that right now. So, hundreds of users, we staggered it, stepped into it, did several different rollouts. You guys have been super supportive with offering every level of training from, a couple hour onboarding and sessions really geared towards new users. We have a monthly user group meeting where we invite, users to join, and the intent, is ask questions and learn about the tool. But, the intent is to also promote that collaboration that we mentioned earlier. So, I think we still spend a lot more time doing the EasyRCA buttons and questions and support that way. So that's still very beneficial. But, I hope at some point it turns into, the participants really running the meeting and asking each other questions and supporting along. So, yeah, we put it all into place. I would say we started doing analysis. We didn't worry too much about the quantity and quality. We just tried to get people using it and understanding it, asking questions. You're always adding new features and asking for our input. So, I think we've helped shape, the tool so that we can use it better ourselves too. So.
Well, I feel like you've really been a model implementation. So again, when you and I first started talking, just even that idea that, especially given the role that you're in, you're not like forcing this on anyone. You're really trying to kind of do a show and tell to some extent. Hey, I really think this would help you. Start using it. I'm here to support you. And then I think you've just been a model of like, let's pick some plants, let's get it there, let's get some of those folks trained as they start to see it benefit them, roll it out a little bit further, and then kind of letting it happen. I mean, it feels organic, but I know from your perspective, it probably has been a lot of work of kind of that, that adoption process. But I think it's been a model, and it's borne a lot of fruit, right? 650 people. And I really like how you said, and that's one of the things I know we talk about a lot, is just try to get people using a tool at first. Don't worry so much if they're using it exactly right or the results are perfect. But once they start to use it, then they're going to, on their own, start to say, I want to get better at this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I told them from the beginning, look, if you're going to do root cause analysis, this tool will help you do it more efficiently and better quality. So, it would help you with getting those numbers up. And I think once people kind of decided to try it, it becomes more evident. And then, we probably get into it maybe a little later, but the addition of the AI stuff in the tool, starting with like the executive summary writing, and then now that, it's offering, suggested nodes and things like that, that's really helped me get it implemented more. As people use those and they see it, it helps them and it answers their questions along the way. It helps them drive to the right level of detail. So I think I saw a little surge after some of those features were added.
Okay, well, I wanted to ask about features. We'll jump to the AI. So one of the things I did want to dive into is just some of the features, and let's just start with AI. You just brought that up. So tell us about how AI has been adopted. I know there's a potential tension between, whenever you introduce AI, everyone's nervous. People aren't going to do the work anymore. They're just going to click a button and do it for them. But you've kind of said like, no, it's actually giving people more confidence, increased adoption. Can you tell us about how that dynamic has played out?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that was skeptical about it at first, and I think the ability and the timing of when you rolled out the different features, starting with using it to create my executive summary and my report, realizing that the tool could help me be more concise and really reach the audience that I needed and save me tons of time. Got comfortable using it in that manner, and then the ability to have it suggest nodes and even corrective actions and things like that popped up, and realizing that I didn't have to keep anything that it suggested. It was just things there as suggestions. I could delete it very easily if I needed to delete a node, or it also generated some thought. It may say something or suggest something that then led me to add a couple more of my own. So just knowing that it's not final, or that it doesn't really determine, the path of your analysis, just helpful.
And I'm guessing it's helpful to say, I'm staring at a quote blank sheet of paper. I want to get started. Knowing I can like kick things off is probably nice to say, hey, I can always go back and edit, but I like editing more than I like starting from scratch maybe sometimes as well.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And then, as you go down and get some depth in your analysis, I think it was helpful to encourage people to keep drilling until they got to a systemic root cause. And I think that was a problem in the past. I think we were pretty shallow in our analysis. So with the AI, it suggested nodes on down into the systemic roots. So it helped us know what level to get to.
It's great. Yeah, and I think even on that side, sometimes people might not even know what is a systemic root or physical roots are pretty straightforward, but I think human is more so, but systemic, this is probably a good way for them to say, oh, that's what it's talking about. Now I know what an answer might be.
Yep.
So it's helping in that regard. Are there any other features you'd highlight as particularly helpful for you all?
The feature of being able to look at whether you use the action list or however method you use, but the ability to go and track the verification tasks and corrective actions so that you know that you are getting the solutions implemented. Outside of that, I would say, for me, definitely still from looking at it from kind of a headquarters perspective, the ability to publish and share and collaborate, I think is huge, and it's super easy. Click the little picture of the globe, and it shows up in the publish list. So
it's great. Well, and I on the dashboards, again, that's really, as a company, we really try to develop software based on what our folks like you are asking for. And so really you're the one who kind of pushed us into to more of the data analytics. If you remember, you sent me a sample email and said, I'd love to get an email every month with kind of this type of report. Now, it probably didn't happen as fast as you wanted, but the good news was we did actually create that report, but that actually led us down kind of the Power BI path to say, well, wait a second, if we can do this in an email form, what if we could push it into Power BI and give a whole lot more analysis to folks, again, at corporate like you, who want to see things happening all across, all the plants, not just one. So again, thank you for that suggestion and for sticking with us as we developed it. I think it's been a really useful feature.
No, you bet. Been enjoyed to work with. I enjoy working on things like that, and y'all's response has been great.
In terms of specific examples, can you think of maybe a particular RCA or a problem that was solved that, is like maybe a success story you share internally or with others about kind of the power of, either root cause analysis or EasyRCA or the combination of those?
There were several users really early on that did a few analysis that I think did really good job. Something that may seem as common or simple as an air compressor failure that was done by one of our team members at the Fayetteville, Arkansas site. Really worked through and found good lubrication strategy errors that was causing that failure. I don't remember the specifics of the the savings or the all around it, but I use that one as example to teach others around the company, what a good one looks like. And then up at our Aberdeen, Maryland facility, more than just an example of one failure that we could use, we had a supply chain leader up there that created a template that was can be really used as a starting point for any component failure. So really takes you down the two different paths of whether it was a premature failure or that it lasted as long as you think it should. It kind of takes you down whether you would look at how it was installed and maintained and operated, or we look at our method for detecting a failure before it shuts us down, and our ability to plan and schedule and execute it before it failed while it was in the backlog. So a couple of examples, I guess, of I think big success stories, where
it's great.
Worked well.
And I remember being at an Aberdeen training with you, and maybe it's that same one, but like I just remember somebody had created a template because you mentioned 1,500 of the same piece of equipment. So you almost had like a model of like, hey, here's this piece of equipment. Here's how you can kind of get started diagnosing what might have gone wrong, which I think is pretty powerful if people begin to use a tool that way, right? Where they're actually, the tool itself is helping them learn from each other in the process that they go through.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the managers at one of our sites when we were piloting it very early on said the benefit to him was as he and his team were talking through an analysis, some of their young managers really learned about the process while they were going through the analysis too. So it's very educational just to walk through one. So
it's great.
That point.
One thing I did want to touch on, you mentioned having training at all different levels. How has, and I know that we've done kind of like kind of how to click the buttons training, if you will, just the software itself, but also kind of RCA training. And you guys have even done multi-day kind of PROACT training. How has your team found the PROACT training in helping them kind of think about RCAs?
Yeah, it really helps with the depth of the analysis. When we were doing them before, almost everyone will tell you they were using some form of a 5Y, which I think there's definitely a place for. But when they really see the PROACT methodology and the process of putting down the hypothesis and failure modes, and then verifying things as true or false, and kind of ruling out, and process of elimination, and preserving the evidence up front. And I mean, it really shaped the way we were doing it. Even knowing that we had pretty much a blank slate to start with, because we really hadn't had, in general, most of the folks that are using it now hadn't probably had any formal root cause analysis training.
That's great. And so would you say they, kind of that idea of, obviously 5Ys can be just a really effective tool. It's easy to teach. It can go very fast. PROACT is going to kind of help be a little more comprehensive, dig a little bit deeper. Do you see folks kind of thinking to themselves, okay, what is the best tool to kind of solve this particular problem?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I think as people have learned more about it, I think we see us just starting straight out with the PROACT, with the cause tree, and
okay.
Because there's nothing really there. It can be, I tell people, it can be as simple as a one branch straight down, which is basically a 5Y, but you can still do it in the PROACT, template, or PROACT, look.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's almost like a 3D 5Y to some extent, right?
Exactly.
It's just giving you more options to kind of think about. In terms of kind of future features, I know you're always thinking about the future, how you can do your job better. That's what I always appreciate about you, how your teams can, how we can. What features in your mind are kind of on that next list for you?
Yeah, and there's a couple, and I think most of them are right on the front end of the analysis process. And by that I mean maybe a way to look at all of our data and automate some of the triggers. And I know we've worked on that a little bit. Some of that's right now limited to how much data we're willing to put out there for
Right.
others to analyze and stuff. But I think we'll figure that out at some point and be able to automate triggers and have the tool suggest certain analysis, either on a big, I call them special cause failure or single point, but even more so the common cause stuff, the stuff where we can analyze the data for. And then whether we get that trigger or not, a little mobile kickoff app or some sort, where maybe a tablet, all of our mechanics now have tablets. And
Okay.
I envision if they have a downtime event that they see is, man, this thing's taking a little while, I'm sure they're going to want us to do an analysis. Let me start taking some pictures and collecting some of the evidence. And then, the next morning when I come in, maybe it's showing up there as a possible RCA, and they've already got, the stuff collected while it's happening. I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, so you're kind of like, I'd like automated triggers and I'd like manual triggers, effectively.
Sure.
Where different problems kind of show up in a queue, and I can decide of that queue which ones to do a little bit of an investigation on.
Yep, absolutely. And then that mobile app, to me, it could walk them through and ask them certain questions to prompt them to collect evidence, take pictures, look at things while the event's going on, just to keep you from losing that. Sometimes, you don't think about it until way later, right? And you might
Absolutely. Well, and I think with some of the AI tools that we're working on and improving, even to be able to start to add the images, potentially even a video, to a repository and know that that's already being analyzed and giving you some potential ideas as to what might be going on, could be really useful as well. Well, it's good. Well, that's really helpful. If you're kind of giving advice to others who might be considering EasyRCA, what advice might you give them? How might you help them to think about whether evaluating or rolling out or using, maybe some ideas you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important advice is the people, right? So get involved with Sebastian. Our account manager or support person has been John Bartlow. Just super helpful. I think there's probably still a place on your website to reach out and schedule some time. See a little review, get on there and let them show you some of the features. If you don't see something that you're looking for, ask. Been very responsive and helpful. I'm sure there's other people that are using the tools. Reach out and maybe show some get shown some demonstrations and such. I don't think there's a tool out there that gives you the flexibility from simple to complex and has the power to track the verification and corrective action tasks. But if I was putting together a program, I wouldn't use any other software or tool that didn't have those two features.
That's great. That's helpful. Yeah, and then I think best practice. I think you really, again, as I said, modeled just that really adoption process. A lot of, I think, companies have a, hey, we want everyone to use this. Let's buy it for everyone. Let's send out an email. They're not using it. Something's wrong with the software. I think you took a very strategic view of saying, no, let's kind of just ramp people up over time. So I think that's a best practice that I thought was really, really amazing. Just as we start to kind of wind down, is there anything else about your experience, in your role using EasyRCA that you might want to share? Love to hear any of that might be helpful.
Maybe one of the undervalued, I think, features or thoughts about doing any RCA, and EasyRCA software supports this, is using your timeline as an analysis tool. It's more than just to chronicle the event or chronicle what happened. If you go back far enough, look at when the equipment was installed, look at the last time it was inspected, look at the last time it went through sanitation, when did it go through a rebuild or a redesign, look at the history of the thing. Look at trends of failures and components and things like that. So, use your timeline as a tool for analysis more than just an opportunity or a tool to chronicle the event. It can help you, figure out when something changed or when, something may have started.
That's great. Cause. Well, and just as a little sneak preview to you, we are kind of working on kind of a visual timeline that we think will hopefully over the next several months be incorporated in the product, which I think would help even more. There's already a timeline built in, but it's more text-based. We think a visual would be really helpful as well.
Yep. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's good. Well, Jerid, it's been great talking to you. Again, this has been Jerid Jackson. He is the Reliability and Asset Management Senior Manager at PepsiCo Foods North America. They've been just a joy to work with over these last few years. So thank you for working with us. Thank you for giving us your time on this podcast. We appreciate it. To all the listeners out here, this podcast, Reliability 4.0, is really about helping engineers take steps to be more successful in their work, to solve problems, obviously with the power of root cause analysis. This whole episode's been a little bit about EasyRCA. So if you're looking for training under our PROACT brand, or if you're looking for software under EasyRCA, please check out reliability.com. We'd love to help you think about how you can solve problems as a company, how you can scale that problem solving, and how you can kind of analyze it all along the way to make sure you're doing things a little bit better. So again, Jerid, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. And to everybody, let's go forth and make the world a more reliable place. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thank you.